And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Beaver Stadium, State College, Pennsylvania, Michigan State losing tonight, regular season finale, 35-16 at the hands of the Nittany Lions. The score was 21-16 with less than 5 minutes to go. And if you'd have told me coming into this game Michigan State would be down 21-16, 5 minutes to go, I wouldn't have been shocked. But I would have been like, man, they're still punching, they're still fighting, still, working hard, doing some decent things. And they did some decent things to come back from a 21-3 deficit. Peyton Thorne drove them down there, a couple touchdown drives, competitive. Final score not indicative of how competitive this game was. Penn State, good team, 10-2, possibly a Power 5 team. For Michigan State to come on the road, take on a team that's headed to a New Year's Day, New Year's Six bowl game on Senior Day, play pretty well, stop the run through the middle stages of the game, hang in it, get some things done again for a second straight week with intermediate passing. There's growth there, but they still lose, end up 5-7. In the regular season. We'll talk about the bowl picture in a minute. Also, Malcolm Jones being reinstated, a little bit of that. A little bit of a controversy on the 4th and 1, whether Michigan State should have called timeout. We can get into all those things, but Paul Konyndyk, your thoughts about Michigan State today? We learned a few things, but it's a tough way to end a tough season.
Well, I mean, I get tired of people telling me, like, I can't believe this happened again or whatever. My question is, what did you expect? I mean, you said you wouldn't be surprised if it was competitive. I would be if I came in here and I knew that Chuck Brantley wasn't going to play and Jaden Mangum wasn't going to play. And then again, you have other guys. Jalen Hunt didn't play, so there's more next man up. You've got 3 scholarship corners out there. So that's an issue. And you've got again walk-ons playing. If you told me that Sam Edwards was going to be the long snapper today.
I didn't even notice that.
Right.
Where did that go? Donovan wasn't the guy? I saw Donovan during pregame.
No, Sam Edwards was the guy that long snapped.
So he beat him out for that job? Really?
I don't know, but he's a backup linebacker. And,
I watched a little bit of pregame, and I did see a foul long snap by somebody, and I was like, oh, but I didn't realize Edwards. Okay.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm going to go back and look at it, but that was my impression.
I don't doubt you. I tend to take my eye off.
What I'm saying is like, and you mentioned in the press conference today when you ask X about having 27 different starters on defense. I mean, that's when if you're really objective about it and you really just think about that. Think about the guys that they have playing. Think about the guys that are out here on the travel roster today that we haven't seen all year, like James Schott, defensive end that he didn't play today, but he's going to get a red shirt. And then other guys like you just week after week, it kind of shocks me that this team is this either beat up, has this much attrition, and keeps on going to the mat and picking itself back up. I mean, there's like on defense, there's a couple times in the second half where they had 3rd and 10. They did everything they needed to do to stop, first and second downs. They had 3rd and 10, and Penn State completes a first down pass, and then Michigan State kind of rallied and actually got off the field. I mean, the first two defensive possessions of the second half were like that, and the only thing that really hurt Michigan State in that sequence is they got killed on that Jaden Reed punt fumble, and there are 2 of them. I mean, you think of so Michigan State's defense basically did everything they had a couple busts early. They got tricked on the trick play. They had the coverage bust on the first touchdown, but aside from that, like the front 7 played as good as they possibly can play under these circumstances, and I take my hat off to defensive coordinator Scotty Hazelton for how these guys have played in the front 7. Aaron Brule gets better and better each week, and today we saw Dylan Tatum play the most snaps he's ever played. He's a guy that I would have been shocked if you'd on the field going into the season, but he's a guy that did some good things today.
And I would have expected Penn State to go after him more early on, and they didn't. They ended up getting him, on that back shoulder fade to the tight end for a touchdown, and that was a trick play also. It was like second down to the red zone. That was after the fumbled punt, I think, and they. I think on that when they had done the quick shift and put like 3 people out wide, and earlier in the game they did that and threw a bubble. This time they faked a bubble, and the guy that ended up catching the touchdown blocks Tatum like he's going to block. It's like a crack and go. He fakes like he's going to block, and then he releases. Mm-hmm. And Tatum didn't really fall for it. He turned his hips and was with him. But again, it's football, and every team has trick ploys and things like that. But Tatum turned and ran with him and had him pretty well covered. But the ball was on the right hash, so the ball was in the air a very short amount of time. So, people are wondering why he didn't get his head around. The ball's only in the air for probably less than 2 seconds. It's not like a deep shot where he's got time to get back. Had it covered, back shoulder, touchdown. Hey, they're going to make plays.
You got to do what you got to do first.
Yeah, but so they got Tatum on that one, and Tatum was involved in the 4th and 1 play, where they were outnumbered 4-3. But for the most part, Tatum, I thought we didn't see any slippage from him. For a guy that I thought on defense last year in high school was not a contact player, to use the Mark D'Antonio term, I was like, man, that guy's got to learn how to play defense because he played safety like a swimmer trying to swim without getting wet. But he was okay today. And I was kind of surprised Penn State didn't go after him a little bit more, try him a few times deep. Didn't happen. Here's the deal. Michigan State comes in here with Tatum being the 27th different starter this year and all that stuff. They go to a dime, and Khalil Majid is a new dime back with Malik Spencer, 2 guys that were not near the playing group 3 weeks ago. All right, and they still, Penn State's a good team. Penn State goes for about 400 yards of total offense. But here's the deal. Penn State scored their points left-handed. They scored their points with trick plays. That crack and go, that's kind of a trick concept. The double pass touchdown, that's a trick concept. 4th and 1, a quick shift out there, and they throw the down route, and they catch Michigan State outnumbered. They did not line it up and just barrel past Michigan State or drop back and just victimize Michigan State. Right. Michigan State, I'm not saying that Michigan State should have won, but Michigan State showed up and exchanged with them, and Penn State got it done with gadgets. And they kind of had to. They were in trouble in this game.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you talk about them not going after Tatum. I think the one thing that I was really impressed with Michigan State's pass rush was pretty dang consistent. In terms of getting pressure on.
Yeah.
They kept Clifford for the most part in the pocket, but also brought enough pressure at him, to make him make some decisions. He's a good quarterback, and he took some sacks. I thought this is the best Michigan State's pass rush has looked in a while. Yeah. I think this performance, under the circumstances, was on par with what I saw from Michigan State against Michigan.
It's similar.
But I mean, maybe the Michigan game it was more impressive because Michigan was maybe more high powered in some ways. The running game was tougher to stop. But under the circumstances, Michigan State played very good. I thought. There was a lot of more. This game seemed to be more like what I'm used to seeing from Michigan State with violent run defense stopping.
Mm-hmm.
When guys arrived at the ball carrier,
mm-hmm.
it wasn't the guy carrying him. There was very few of those ones we've seen in the last few weeks where you see a ball carrier arriving at the defensive
mm-hmm.
player and the guy being dragged 4 yards. This was firm. This was sudden, and they got Michigan State out in space a few times, but when it was between the tackles,
mm-hmm.
it looked more like the D'Antonio style of run defense.
It was all right. I agree with that. And there's some people out there that are going to be like, man, why are we even talking about this? They lost the game. The season's over. It's 5-7. The whole thing's a wash. I'm like I said in the VCast last week. I'm in 2023 mode. I was in 2023 mode, like coming out of the Illinois game.
Right.
You try to get what you can out of this season or whatever. But it's like I mentioned to Mel Tucker after the game, and I've said this before, and I apologize for repeating it, but last year when Michigan State went 11-2, one of Mel Tucker's quotes was, we just keep chopping. It's relentless. It's not over. We just continue working. You're never done. So when you're 11-2, you win a bowl game in Atlanta. You come back and you go right back to work. Then it's winter football. Then it's spring football. Then it's out of season. Then it's August camp. You're never done. And you check to see what the record is. It's 5-7. The regular season's over. There might be a bowl game. I don't know. But in terms of it not being done, I'm looking at. It's a barometric reading on the program that the roster is depleted as it is, and they keep answering Mel Tucker's call for physicality and doing things correctly. Now, Michigan State had some blown coverages today, which was a huge problem last year, and it was a problem in September. And they kind of got it solved a little bit with Xavier Henderson back. But the blown coverage, on their first touchdown, Michigan State brings a corner blitz, Amir Speed, and they rotate, Kendall Brooks from safety over here. He becomes a corner. And Xavier Henderson is in the middle like rat in the hole. And Dylan Tatum's over here as a corner. And Khalil Majid was supposed to rotate deep middle to give him a cover 3. 1, 2, 3. Kendall Brooks, Khalil Majid, Dylan Tatum, cover 3. Xavier Henderson, rat in the hole. Khalil Majid, walk-on, redshirt freshman from New Jersey, prep school in Connecticut. I wrote this in one of the stories or whatever. We've talked about him during the season. He played in 2018, had some pretty good film, was also a lacrosse player, I think. 2018 had some film. 2019, no season, injured. He's on Michigan State's radar. 2020, didn't have a season, COVID. 2021, came to Michigan State, redshirted. He played last week like 2 plays. That's the first time he's played football since 10th grade as a sophomore in high school. Hadn't played football. Okay? So he comes out today, and because Mangum's not here and Chuck Brantley's not here, when they go dime, Malik Spencer's on the field, who was not available the first 8 weeks of the season. Here comes Spencer and Khalil Majid trotting on the field. I mean, this is like third-string guys. I mean, Spencer's going to be good. Guys. Spencer's going to be pretty good someday. But this is like second-string green and white game level. Okay, right. So he comes out. Khalil Majid hasn't played. He might have played a snap or two against Michigan, but he didn't get to where he was supposed to be. And you saw Xavier Henderson throw a fit. And Henderson is the guy nearest the receiver. A lot of people thought Henderson was beaten. No, I mean, it's a redshirt freshman who hasn't played since 2018. It's not Xavier Henderson. So Michigan State tries to bring a corner blitz. They don't get it carried out. To me, Michigan State with the pass defense problems last year, this is not symptomatic of that. This is a fourth-string guy that didn't get the signal or whatever, and he blew it. It's not his fault. And on the double pass, Nateote played 1 snap today, I think. Van Sumeren got hurt. He went in, and on that pass to the wide receiver, Nateote goes after it, and the tight end runs right by him, and Brule points at him. It's Nateote, Right. So, I mean, it's missed assignments, but if it's Angelo Gross over and over and over, that's one thing. But this is not Kendall Brooks and Xavier Henderson and guys just kind of, flaking out. It's third-string guys, which I'm like, that's not symptomatic of the problem. I don't think the problem is it's not like an existential thing that carried over from last year and there's no fixing it. To me, those two things are, for this season, they're kind of mulligans as I look at the program, look at the team, look at the defense, and try to gain a construct of where things are headed going into next year. Those 2 plays aren't part of it.
Yeah,
I mean, Nateote might be part of it at some point, but not today. Third-string linebacker makes a mistake.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way as you do. It's different if it's a guy that's been doing it over and over and over again, and you can't get it fixed. Like, I felt pretty strongly about like guys like Amir Speed. Some of the things I don't like, you're not going to get some of those things fixed. But if it's a guy that hasn't played, if it's a guy that was like, let's say it's a guy that was switched from positions. A guy that came over from offense, like Tony Lippett back in the day when he got pressed into duty at Iowa, and looked pretty bad playing corner, like as a redshirt freshman or true freshman. I mean, that stuff absolutely happens. And I think the thing that presses me, what I'm looking at, is guys that are playing a lot and guys that have played a lot, and are they getting better? And you look at Aaron Brule, he's getting better. He's before he's running into plays and you're like, oh, he's in position to make a play, but he ran right past it, or he didn't have a feel for what he was doing. Now he's arriving there firmly, not overrunning, not being out of control. He's there and he's making plays in control. I think Simeon Barrow, like Derek Harmon, all these guys that have played, Deshaun Mallory, he came back healthier today, and
he made a big play on 3rd and 1, which set up the 4th and 1. That 4th and 1 play doesn't happen without him beating a guy and setting an edge. Mallory, coming back after
Harmon. I thought Slade played. Obviously, Slade. He hasn't been himself this year, but he played good. Derek Harmon, continues to get better. Avery Dunn continues to show progress. So these are guys, even Ben Summerlin, he's like, he does not have the instincts of like the linebacker that you want, and he, but he tries and he's doing his best, and he's going up against a good running game, and it seemed like in this game, like the stuff that they were really gaining a lot of yardage on was that stuff that was out on the edge a little bit. But between the tackles, where they have been giving up yardage lately, they didn't today. So that's progress. You think of one of the things we've talked about in the last week, you and I have talked about, is like, okay, how does this end? Like the odds are that they're going to lose this game. But how does it end? Is there one side of the ball so deficient, that it capsizes? Is special teams the huge problem that it was last week? No, special teams, with the exception of Jaden Reed, take away the Jaden Reed stuff, special teams was really, really good today in terms of like, okay, so they make the change at long snapper, okay?
David, I missed the memo on that.
Jack Stone kicking a 51-yard field goal.
Wow.
That's progress, because it's not saying, hey, we're not going to do this anymore because we we have no chance at it. It's saying, hey, we've seen this in practice. We've seen what you can do in practice. And I don't care if it looks bad for us. If you miss it, we're going to do it because that's what you're supposed to do in football. Writers be damned. I mean, it's easy for us to say, or anybody else on Twitter to say, see, I told you so when they miss it. But at some point, you have to make those kind of plays. You have to have that kind of progress. So they made progress on special teams, in my opinion. And
I give credit for Michigan State for calling those timeouts late in the second quarter to give themselves, because it was looking like, they're going to score, go up 21-3, and Penn State gets the ball to begin the second half. Michigan State interrupted that with a couple of stops, and confidence in their defense. Stop the clock, miss a field goal. State gets the ball back, a couple of completions, and they set up for the field goal. That was good.
That's more progress too, because one of the things I think you really judge a defense, or I judge a defense on, like, are you getting stops and going into the half? Right? That was it. Can you get that stop for Penn State that gets the ball in the second half? So they got the stop going into the half. We're able to get a score, but that was huge, keeping them out of the end zone there. They ended up getting two back-to-back stops in defensive series in the third quarter. That was not happening earlier this year. Michigan State was in this to the end, but it was really in this to the towards the end in comparison to some of the other games that we've seen this year, like the Maryland game, score right before half, score coming out, offense couldn't move the ball. I give the offense credit today for seeing what they got in the middle of the field, and Peyton Thorne getting the ball to Keon Coleman in the middle of the field instead of going deep ball on the edge where defenses are playing them. They did make some adjustments. Now there's still some breakdowns, namely like Daniel Barker's drop pass and stuff like that. And this team does. It's not like they don't have warts. They've got warts, but are they making progress with? Are they making the most of that they can with the ingredients that they have? I say yes.
They still have a backbone, even with all those defensive players out. They still have a backbone. Offensive line against a pretty good defense today. Gave up 3 sacks, but there were times when Thorne had time to throw in some key situations. But that defense, like you're saying, now check this out. So Michigan State made that stop, and they had that missed field goal at the end of the first half. Second half, Penn State gets the ball first, and Michigan State stalls the drive with a sack by Simeon Barrow on 2nd and 12. Then Michigan State, gets it back, and they moved a little bit, got a first down, 3rd and 4, and that's when Daniel Barker, actually it was Malik Hall over the middle, dropped that high pass. I don't know if that was on Thorne or Malik Carr. I don't know if it was. It was kind of here. I don't think it was too high, but it was a little bit hot.
He was under a lot of pressure. Thorne was under a lot of pressure, and I don't.
Got to catch that one, or
I don't know.
Or a little bit. Both of them will probably blame you. They'll blame themselves, both guys.
Yeah, Thorne will tell you that he should have been more accurate, and but you can't.
And the reason that's a big deal is, Michigan State back on defense, and that drive ends with a sack. It's 3rd and 2. They run an RPO. They're looking to run a slant, and it's covered. I think Tatum covered the guy, and he's got it, and Avery Dunn gets loose for a sack. It's supposed to be a quick release RPO. So Penn State's first 2 drives of the second half both ended basically messed up by sacks. Simeon Barrow one, and Avery Dunn the other one. Then they force a punt. Michigan State fumbles the punt. Now, okay, so 3rd and 4, they miss that pass that's open. Next time they fumble a punt. Why is that a big deal? The next 2 times Michigan State got the ball, drive, touchdown, drive, touchdown. They stopped themselves on those 2 drives. Right. They drop a pass, they drop a punt. Penn State wasn't stopping them on offense in the second half, in the third quarter anyway. Meanwhile, Penn State was held to negative yards rushing in the third quarter. I think -4. Now, sacks figured into that, but they tried to run. They couldn't run. And in the third quarter, Michigan State was the better team. You can say that might not mean anything. That's true. But we're just looking for, does the team have a backbone? Are they responding to the people at the top? Are they winning collisions? Those things. Was Michigan State a solid competitive football team? Yes. Type of team that would beat a Minnesota or a Maryland today. Yes, and after they beat Illinois, I thought they were more of like a 6-3 team than a 3-5 team or whatever the record was. That means nothing when you're 5-7 and probably maybe not going to a bowl game. But to beat the point, it's just looking for taking the temperature on the whole operation.
What it means is for next year, to be honest with you, because I see a lot of teams out there. You go back and look at TCU from last year. And they were in similar areas, where they had personnel deficiencies or whatever, and they had a lot of games that were close or they were competitive or whatever. What you want to see, and I remember being out here like at the beginning of the D'Antonio era and going to Ohio State at the beginning of the D'Antonio era, and those were the two teams, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan not so much, but those were the two teams where you really knew where Michigan State had to grow, where they're outclassed. They were getting just absolutely pushed off the ball. They couldn't
run the ball, couldn't stop the run.
Couldn't stop the run. They couldn't pass protect worth anything. They had to, they couldn't run the ball. So like Javon Ringer or whatever, they're putting him out of empty backfield, that kind of stuff. And they were exposed. And some of those games might not have had totally that much different scores than this one, but you can tell a huge difference. And the rebuild job, based on like the physicality and like what you're doing against this type of personnel, it's very apparent. Michigan State, to me, like if you had I don't know what they look like if they had their full complement of bodies, but the way they keep on competing, the way they keep on like developing, I think it's a big deal. And I think Peyton Thorne said something really important today. He was talking about. He showed a little bit of leadership today because he played his tail off today. He took a ton of hits. He took a ton of high hits. He took a lot of shots to the head, and he kept on grinding. He never made any excuses. Right. After the game, he said, like when we're talking about, guys' personnel shortages, he said that it's very important that these guys go into the offseason, they prepare like they're going to be a starter. And I think what he wanted to say is they need to go and prepare like I did when I was at that age, where I knew I was going to take this job and it was mine to take, and I was going to take it because I believed in myself. But that was his attitude. He wants those guys to have the same attitude. And
every defensive player on the roster played this year except for some true freshmen. I mean, if you were on the roster and a defensive player, you had a role.
Yeah.
That's what Thorne was saying. You're that next man up stuff.
But he's talking about he's talking about defensive players, but he's talking in relation to everybody in the program.
So train during the offseason like you're going to be playing because you will.
Yeah, especially like if you go to the offense, look at the offensive line. There's some young guys in there. We saw some good things from Gino Vandenmark. Seeing like Wigginton walk, repping as like a backup center.
No,
Vandenmark and then
Fincher.
Yeah, okay. Seeing those guys out there doing that kind of stuff, it's like, okay, whether you're Ethan Boyd or whomever, Ashton Lepo, I think, traveled today. If you're one of those dudes, you're just one play away.
Yeah.
From you don't know if you're going to be the Brandon Baldwin. Not many people are talking about him. Everyone's talking about Jarrett Horst has to be the guy. You don't know if you're going to be Spencer Brown. So it is very important that if you're given an opportunity to play in a program like this, you need to rep like it matters, like you want to be there. And not that you want to be there, but you want to win playing time, and you want to take it from someone else.
I agree. And in the trenches, bottom line, Michigan State was competitive today. Those games when they played Penn State here in 2008, and even when they played Iowa and got blown out early in the D'Antonio era, Michigan State was not competitive in the trenches. Michigan State is competitive in the trenches right now. Offensive lines come around. They didn't blow holes in this defense, but Penn State's really improved their defense since what happened to Penn State against Michigan. They shut out Maryland 3 weeks ago. So, that part's good. I thought Thorne, he's not perfect, but he's pretty good. Keon Coleman, Trey Mosley making plays. Malik Carr at tight end. Running backs, kind of okay. In the trenches, okay. Then you get the linebacker, Nate Ote plays one snap and it bites him. Dylan Tatum, in a couple plays here and there. In the back four, they're doing what they can, but that's where the ice was thin. And against a very good team, ranked number 11 in the country, by the way, Penn State.
With the statistically best pass rush in the Big Ten.
Number one in the Big Ten in sacks. Thorne got knocked down a lot today, but that's a very good pass rush that's quick, and they do some movement things, and they're tough to block.
Yeah, and the criticism of Thorne sometimes of people being like, he missed this guy wide open. Well, there's only a certain amount of you can't go if you're like under about ready to get swarmed under, you can't go through a read progression. I mean, you have a limited amount of time. I thought Thorne did a nice job for the most part of going, trying to go where he needed to go without giving up, without being sacked. I mean, he was very deliberate and he tried to get rid of it fast today because he needed to. It's like.
Yeah, he did. And sometimes they had to take some risks because it was time to take a risk. And one time he threw a risk up on third down and Trey Mosley snagged it out. They went in and scored. Because it was that time of the game, 21-10, fourth quarter, time to make a risk. He did it, and Mosley made the play.
I think Mosley's another guy that did it. Mosley had a really good game today. And, he figures in well when they go with passing like underneath. He's a really good possession receiver. He's not going to get you a ton of yak yards, but he's got really good hands, and especially when they're trying. When defensive backs have to be concerned with Keon Coleman or Jaden Reed, and it opens up some. When guys run the right route combinations, you can rely on Trey Mosley, and that's a guy that he said he's coming back, and people are like, yeah, well, big deal. He's not that great. Well, that's a guy that you can, you don't know you don't have that guy until he's not there.
State's 3 receivers are pretty good.
I mean, he made 4 good catches today.
If you were a bowl rep here today and you hadn't seen Michigan State much and you're here looking at Penn State, you come away from this saying, man, Michigan State's not bad. Big Ten is pretty good. That's what you think if you're just like an objective guy coming in from Arizona as a bowl rep. And Michigan State is not great. We all know that. Are there some things, some kernels of progress to take away? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Now, in terms of game management, the 4th and 1 situation, when all of a sudden they motioned those 4 guys out past the numbers. I was sitting next to you. I'm like, call timeout. You got 3 timeouts left. There's 4 minutes to go in the game. Spend one. And Tucker was asked if he thought about calling timeout. He said no. He said, we thought we could handle it, but they were outnumbered 4-3, and that's basically a long handoff. It's 4th and 1. Penn State had basically had lost confidence in themselves to pick up a 4th and 1 inside run. So they put 4 people over there, including the running back, with running back and a wide receiver and 2 tight ends. Basically, it's a long handoff, running play to the running back with 3 blockers. It's a running play, but they went out there to do it because they wanted to get away from Maverick Hansen and Slade and Mallory and those guys. And it was a good ploy. Michigan State should have called timeout. Now, as it turned out, Xavier Henderson said he thought about calling for a timeout. I don't know if he's got the freedom to do that. He could probably have just looked and done it. We've seen D'Antonio coach a lot of times. How many times do we see D'Antonio run down the sideline and call timeout, a defensive timeout? That's what he did quite frequently. Now, Henderson runs over there, and as it turns out, Brulé's over there, and there's 3 blockers, but 2 of the blockers go on Brulé. So you got 2 blockers on 1. Now the numbers advantage is gone, and now Henderson has a beat at the ball carrier, but Dylan Tatum takes the guy head on, and Henderson said if Tatum had played it a little differently, then Henderson might have gotten to the edge. Still would have gotten the first down, but maybe knocked him out of the 8-yard line or so. But Tatum takes him on head on. Instead of maybe going outside in to leverage the ball carrier back in here, then Henderson would have gotten him. So it's a freshman making his first start, but timeout would have maybe they scored anyway, but timeout is probably the right thing to do there. Michigan State had a 6-man blitz going, and they had 2 over 1 over there, 2 defensive players. They had Halliday and Speed against one receiver over there. So 2, 6, that leaves you 3. Over here against 3, it's 4, timeout. But Tucker said no. He said if we went under it, if we'd leveraged it properly, we would have made the play. I can respect him saying that, but
you could say that, but you got a freshman out there.
Yeah. So that was a big play. That it was 21-16 at that time. You get to stop there. Michigan State's got the ball down 5, 4 minutes to go. If I'm Penn State, I kick a field goal there and go up 8. You're up 5.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't understand that because obviously the 2 misses from Penninger factored into that. And the other thing is like James Franklin does. If that happens like that, then this is feeling like it already was feeling like 2018 Brian Lewerke or whatever,
Felton Davis game.
Yeah, I mean because
hang it in there
because Michigan State was down by at least like 2 scores in that game, and they rallied back, and but yeah, I don't know. I felt like throughout this game that Michigan State was playing as hard as they possibly could. I just didn't feel like they had enough to push it over the top. I felt like Penn State's their defensive line, the defense is way more congruent and plays way better together than the Manny Diaz defense at Miami. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you've got unleashed defensive linemen and you've got linebackers that are like spectating. These defensive backs that Penn State has are so physical, and they played really well today. And that's another thing. I think like Keon Coleman, big area of growth with him today. I thought he did a nice job. Malik Carr as well. I didn't feel like Michigan State. I felt like Michigan State had enough to give these guys a battle, which they did. They didn't have enough to get it over the top,
right?
In my opinion.
Now, what were turnovers? There was the interception by Thorne, and then there was the fumble punt. Were those the only turnovers?
Well, you had the first play of the game, like the first play on offense, or the second.
The lateral.
The lateral.
Crap like that. I mean, Michigan State, we're talking about things that Michigan State's doing well, but until they get some of those loose screws tightened up, then you can't play consistent winning football. Since stopping the run's been a problem for a long time because of what we talked about, but they contained the run against a good running attack today most of the day.
I'm not sure what that does for you. Honestly, Jaden Reed's not – he's beat up. Let's face it. He's been beat up all season. That's not the Jaden Reed – the Jaden Reed that we saw last year at Northwestern in the opening game or whatever, or in some of those other games, or even, before he got hurt last year or beat up, that's Jaden Reed you can throw that to, and he's going to make a big play. At this point in the season, I'm not sure that you want that to be like one of your opening plays. But
well, I mean, there's.
But
I don't know. I think it was a fine play. Just he should have dove on the ball. Situational awareness. We talked about that with Ron Armstrong.
He had a really rough game today.
He did. He fumbled 2 punts, lost one of them. Situational awareness needs to improve, and I don't know how you improve that. You drill it in games, drill it in practices. Michigan State's punting, the ball's rolling to the 10-yard line, and Montorie Foster stops it when it probably would have rolled to the 5. Just situational awareness. It's easy for us to say up here eating a donut, but the ball, you're on punt coverage. The idea is to let the ball go as far to the goal line as possible, and he's scooping it like a shortstop. I mean, though Michigan State's close to being a pretty good team, but things like that, if you don't get them ironed out, you're never going to turn the corner.
I can accept that with guys like Dylan Tatum. Even like guys like Majid, who hasn't played, like you said, since 2018. But Montorie Foster's been on special teams for a long time. That's unacceptable to him. It's unacceptable for Jaden Reed, not to fall on the ball. It's unacceptable for Jaden Reed, as good as he is, and I've got a world of respect for him. He's one of my favorite Michigan State players of all time, having covered him. And he's a very good person, a very good football player. But that can't happen. What happened today, the 2 fumbles, you just can't do that to your team. And he knows that, and he probably feels worse about it than anybody, because he is, he cares that much. But
bowl picture,
it's not happen. I don't think it'll happen. It's possible. Like the weird thing is to sit here and like pontificate and try to figure out who's in and who could possibly in and not be in at 5 and 7. I'll just put it this way. I think some things will have to happen for Michigan State to get in terms of other teams that get offered, because they're ahead of Michigan State, and if they might turn those down. At the same time, I think if Michigan State does get a bowl bid, that this team, if checking their pulse, these guys want to play. They want to go out. They want to build for the future for the program, and that's another good indicator in terms of like checking that pulse of this team is going in the right direction.
Now, Thorne and Henderson said they want to play, and Henderson's a guy I'd be wondering, would he just want to opt out? No, he wants to play. Thorne wants to play. Like Henderson said, if you read the story, Henderson thought it was over, and he was already going around the room saying thank yous to the coaches. And Tucker said, "Hey, there's still a chance." Thorne and Henderson were not even aware of the 5 and 7 rule. If there's not enough 6-win teams that are bowl eligible, then some 5 and 7 teams go in. And which 5 and 7 teams go in? The ones with the best APR graduation rate. So Michigan State's behind 3 or 4 of those. 2 or 3 5-win teams got their 6th win today. There were 8 openings. So you're getting down to openings number 5, 6, and 7. I don't know if UNLV was still playing.
UNLV won.
A&M, did they? So, and they've got a better APR than Michigan State, so they'll jump Michigan State. Texas A&M is leading LSU. I don't know if they won or not, but they would get to 5 and 7. I don't know what their APR is.
They don't have as good an APR as Michigan State. The teams that would be ahead of Michigan State APR-wise would be
Auburn,
UNLV, and
there's a couple others. So it's unknown at this hour still. And, we're talking to Ben Flieger about it, Michigan State sports information director. He says there's still some teams playing next week. But bottom line is the players said they want to play. Tucker said, before the players said that, Tucker said, we'll have to see what the scenarios is and those type of things, and it'll be an athletic department decision. So then I went and I spoke with Alan Haller for a moment. And he was in there when Tucker said that, and I said, Mel Tucker said it's going to be an athletic department decision. What are some of the things you look at? He says, yeah, it would be a decision if we get that type of situation. We'll have to look at, what the bowl matchup is, what the location is, see whether it's a positive experience for our players. And part of that would be probably a silent poll of the players. Sometimes things like that happen before you accept it. That's way down the road, but Thorne and Henderson want to play again, and I thought that was interesting.
The other thing you got to think about is, I don't know, again, it probably is not going to happen, but if it's one of those really early bowls, how much does that impact? How much does that bump up against the recruiting calendar? Like, are you preparing for a bowl when you need to be out on the road trying to,
I'd say you play because, you want to get Mangum back on the field. You want to get Dylan Tatum on the field. You want to get, the young running backs, Davian Prim. Remember him? He traveled today. You need those guys getting in practice.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about last year, like Kendall Brooks, like he played a big big role this year, and he was, for the most part, before he got hurt, it was very positive. Seeing him come on to last year, I would have never figured that he would make as big an impact as he did this year. And there's other guys out there like that. Avery Dunn, he's a guy that wasn't even on the travel roster. Michael Fletcher, he's not going to play again next year, but he's a guy that I thought.
Do we know that for sure?
I don't know.
I heard something about that last week, but I didn't confirm it. I don't know.
He could. Some of these guys are in flux. I would assume that he's probably one of those guys, but he's a guy that wasn't on the travel roster. Deshaun Mallard wasn't on the travel roster at the beginning of the year, and these guys are playing big roles. It does matter, and you've got a lot of young guys in that program. You think of all those safeties, like Malik Spencer, Jaden Mangum, and Dylan Tatum. For those guys,
Malcolm Jones, Ade Willie.
For those guys to build chemistry with each other, because so much of it is chemistry, right? You're not necessarily going to be Xavier Henderson, who's been around forever. You've got to work together to solve the puzzle.
Offensive line: Wigginton, Braden Miller, Ashton Lepo. Yeah. Bowl practice is important for those guys,
especially for those guys. When you talk about Coach Cap saying that this is everybody's really impressed with that true freshman class. They're so impressed with those guys and what their upside is. But to get there, you got to take the incremental steps. And I don't know how many practices that would be. Even a half a dozen practices is huge for an offensive lineman. Especially because you're not going to be giving all those to St. Mac or Duplain. You're going to try to rest those dudes. They don't need it, but other guys do need it.
Yeah, and it's not the full 15 practices like it used to be. It used to be 15 practices back when the season ended last week, and then you get a full 3 weeks. Now, everything is you get the accordion effect. It's not as long of a bowl. You only get 2 weeks basically, and only maybe 2 or 3 of those practices might be intense for the young people, but it's still important. It gives the coaches a chance to work with those guys that might have been on the scout team, what's left of the scout team. I have no idea what the defensive scout team even looks like, Paul. They're not tackling. There might not be one because we heard all week that they're not tackling. They're just doing walkthroughs. I don't know who's walking through on that thing. They don't give us a dress list. We just kind of have to look and see. So, we used to get dress lists, what the travel team looked like. I would love to have the travel list for the Washington game in September. I'll bet there are players playing today on defense that did not travel against Washington.
I think there's a good chance. I think there's a good chance that you find half a dozen or a dozen of those guys.
In the playing group today that did not travel to Washington.
I already mentioned some of those. Avery Dunn,
Spencer,
Michael Fletcher,
Sean Mallory,
Sam Edwards, the dude that was the long snapper. You just go a lot of those dudes, and it's pretty amazing because usually you think of 5 or 6 guys. There's probably each year there's 5 or 6 guys that you kind of don't pencil in to have major roles.
And here they were playing rock solid defense in the third quarter of game 12 with third stringers. So that's the part that's encouraging, that they're responding to the coaching like that, because that's no small thing. Go down to A&M is winning tonight, but they've had problem all year with talented players not responding to coaches because they're just not feeling them. All right. So
smoking pot in the locker room.
Supposedly we don't. Is that true?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was.
It's pretty much out there.
You're not talking about me in my old days, are you?
No.
Good. Anyway, I guess that'll wrap it up. So Michigan State showing some heart, just good enough to lose, again, like it's been too many times this year. And the big bruise was last week against Indiana. Otherwise, you're 6-6. Then you're probably playing the Quick Lane Bowl against Eastern Michigan, which would be interesting because Eastern's pretty good this year. But the season maybe came to die today. We'll have to find out in the next few days about bowl eligibility. And the players want to play. We'll see what happens. But and then you got recruiting signing day coming up in 3 or 4 weeks. I'm not sure where that's headed. Michigan State's got about 12 commitments right now, and there's a lot of offers that are out there and a lot of plates spinning around. It's going to be curious to see how that works out coming down the stretch.
So my thing with the signing day stuff, with all that stuff out there, you've got the transfer portal. I really, really hope Michigan State dials it back on the portal stuff because I really think I think
that's the plan.
I know they've said that. He has said that in the past, but my Exhibit A and Exhibit B today would be okay. I'll tell you, Malik Carr. You cannot tell me, and Malik Carr has had a nice resurgence. He's on the uptick again, just like he was at the end of last season. But you cannot tell me that Malik Carr benefited from Daniel Barker being in the program, and you cannot tell me that Daniel Barker was more productive than Malik Carr would have been
if he'd have gotten Barker's role reps.
If he would have got those reps. Now you could argue that Malik Carr might have got hurt, and that could have been the case. But Malik Carr, I really firmly believe in that instance, you're better off really investing in the young guys in your program than bringing in a retread, that has some issues with, accountability issues.
I mean,
my opinion.
Barker had a lot of talent, but just
But he's a fifth-year senior. The whole talent thing. It's the whole allure of upside. I hear that every time a guy that can run a fast 40 or has physical attributes screws up. I hear, well, that was terrible, but he's got great upside. Well, like Amir Speed this year. Everyone's like, oh, he's got upside. He has length as a corner. The guy's terrible. The guy was one of the worst defensive backs I've ever seen at Michigan State.
He got a little strong there, Paul.
No, he's one of the softest defensive backs I've ever seen at Michigan State.
He's a college athlete. He's doing his best.
That's fine. He does not belong in this program.
Well, all right, to that point.
But I'm just saying, I personally feel you're better off investing in guys that you have than bringing in people without the. Let's put it this way: it's not their fault. They're the way they are. That's the way they are. But without the due diligence to realize what you're getting, because they were not getting what they thought they were getting in either of those guys. Mm-hmm. Aaron Brule, totally different story. He's come along and he's done some really good things. I'm impressed with him. Jacoby Windman, even though he's out, those guys are fine. I have no problem, zero problem bringing in transfers. I think the portal is a tool to be used. But the due diligence that you have to perform to bring in the right guys is important. And especially when those guys you're bringing in is going to take away game or potential developmental reps from guys in the program that might be a better fit for who you are as a program or who you want to be. If you value that word culture. And so I shouldn't have ripped on those guys that hard, but they do not belong. They shouldn't have been in this program. I don't think they belong in the program for what the program needs now. And I think if better due diligence had been performed, maybe that wouldn't have been the case.
When you hit the portal, sometimes you don't know what you're getting personality-wise. And Amir Speed, I guess, is a real good personality. The players like him and everything. But, just lacked some agility in there. He's kind of stiff on that post today. We've talked about him enough. But Barker was just kind of unreliable. He made some really good plays, but through the course of the season, but it was just really hard to rely on him. Now, Malik Carr, who's also a transfer once upon a time,
right.
Would he have come along more if he'd gotten those reps? I don't know. They wanted to roll 3 tight ends, and I think those were the 3 best tight ends. You go with Barker, and you just kind of hope that he comes around, but the reliability thing just kind of flaked out here and there. Missing blocks or the 4th down pass play last week where he broke off his route. Kind of did an executive decision on that. That you need to get to where guys are in your program, and like Tucker talks about, confront and demand. We're going to confront you when you do things wrong or whatever. Well, if you're recruited and redshirted, you get confronted enough after 1 or 2 or 3 years. By the time you're a sophomore, you know what you're supposed to do. To that point, but the exception of that is Eli Collins last week that made an executive decision to run it back to the boundary or to the hash, and you miss a field goal. Everybody's got to get to where those things are not happening, and if that continues to happen, it's not going to be good trends going forward. So Tucker's got to confront demand and keep putting the foot on these guys and get those screws tightened, because there's I don't know if a term that I've used in the past is there's a good team in there somewhere. I remember saying that back in 2012 when Michigan State went 6-6, had nothing on offense. Tyler O'Connell struggled, and Tyler O'Connor and the offensive line had a lot of injuries, but that defense was so good, and they were just good enough to lose so often. But it seemed like there was a good team in there somewhere. This team, hard to say because we don't really know what's on defense. We don't know who the people are. Peyton Thorne can play winning football. The offensive line came around. The receivers can play winning football. Running backs are serviceable enough. But the kicking situation, it's things like that, enough to get you beat. Those loose screws, long snapper, kicker, those things have got to get fixed. And you would think those would be correctable. And we'll begin to find out shortly if there's a bowl game, if we can see any progress with that or not. But I'm not going to quite say there's a good team in there somewhere. There kind of is, but I can't say that for sure because we never really saw what defense is. If Xavier Henderson had played all year and Darius Snow had played all year, I don't know. Amir Speed was going to be limited all season, but I think there was a good team in there somewhere. But we said back in the summer, didn't know what was going to happen at kicker. that did cost them a game, 6-6 season.
And then in a game like this, you don't have Ronald Williams. He's not there because he's hurt. And you've got
I thought he'd be a player this year,
but he's hurt. He's not. He's not on the trail roster. You got Chuck Brantley, who didn't play today. So I don't think it's fair to ask to kind of take that pulse and say, is there a good team in there somewhere? I think because there's been so much flux and attrition this year, it's like, are there good soldiers in there? Is it a good culture? And from for the most part, from what I've seen, these guys haven't bailed on each other. There hasn't been finger pointing like one side of the ball, at the other. I think these guys have been good teammates, and for the most part, I think there's some good pieces in there. I honestly, people are like, well, a lot of these guys are leaving. Slade's going to be gone next year. This guy's going to be gone. That guy's going to be gone. You were saying the same thing about Michigan State's basketball team last year. When Max Christie went in the draft, and Michigan State didn't go out and get transfers, and Marble left. I believe that there's enough pieces here. You got to stay healthy, and you got to keep on developing. But these guys, with the experience they got this year, they can take another step. You can't tell me that Derek Harmon didn't benefit from as many reps as he got this year.
Solid player.
There's tons of guys like that. And, we'll see what they do next. I'm really curious if Aaron Brule comes back, and I kind of expect that he will. If he comes back, based on what he did in these last few games, I want to see what he does next, because he's going to, he's starting to feel comfortable here. And I think he's going to do some good things.
Quality control needs to improve. Middle linebacker, they need a thumper, something that can stop a pile. We'll see. That might be something in the portal. I don't know, because it's kind of hard to get that as the true freshman class. We'll be following it as it develops, roster management, the bowl hunt, all those things over at Spartan Mag. Anything else, Paul?
No.
For Paul Konyndyk, Jim Comparoni from Beaver Stadium in State College, Pennsylvania, with the Spartans, covering the Spartans, the VCast, SpartanMag.com.